"Will you marry me?" Jim Bob Ia heard Smith Majok say, but to her confusion, he wasn't looking at her. The words echoed through the private dining room at Seoul's most exclusive Michelin-starred restaurant as everyone around them began to applaud. Smith, her boyfriend of 4 years, was on one knee with a vintage Cartier ring box, proposing to her best friend. Bob Ia's best friend since law school. The same best friend who had called her crying just 2 weeks ago about a devastating breakup. The same best friend Bob Ia had helped move apartments in Chicago, whose bar exam she'd helped her pass, who knew every insecurity Bob Ia carried about never quite belonging anywhere. The same best friend whose perfectly manicured hand was now flying to her mouth in theatrical surprise, her eyes glistening with tears that Bob E., who'd seen this woman ugly cry through 3 failed relationships, knew were as rehearsed as a courtroom performance. "Oh my God, Smith. Yes, of course, yes." Wait, before we proceed, if you were Bob E.A. watching your boyfriend propose to your best friend, what would you do? If you want to find out, and trust me, this story goes places you won't expect, you need to subscribe right now and hit that like button. Because here's the truth, that 50% who watch without subscribing, they might miss the next chapter. The algorithm won't show it to them. But you can make sure you don't miss a single moment of this dangerous twist. Hit that subscribe button. It's free. Drop your location below. Are you watching from the US, UK, or Canada? I need to know where my story family is. Now, let's dive in. But Smith wasn't finished. He stood, slipping the ring on, then turned to address the room. This union brings together 2 powerful families in a strategic alliance. Strategic alliance. Bobia stood frozen, her carefully chosen gift for Smith's promotion celebration, because, yes, this was supposed to be about his new position, their fresh start, sitting forgotten on the table beside her untouched champagne. 18 months in Seoul. 18 months of sacrificing her partnership track, of learning Korean until her tongue bled, of being Smith's girlfriend at every networking event. She'd never been part of the plan at all. Introduction. Bobby Ia could have cried. She could have screamed. She could have thrown the champagne bottle and watched this pristine room descend into chaos. Instead, she picked up her wine glass, raised it in a mock toast, and spoke in perfect crisp Korean. "May you both get exactly what you deserve." The room went silent. Everyone understood the formal structure that sounded like a blessing but carried the weight of a curse. Then she walked out, head high, heels clicking against marble like gunshots. The facade lasted until she hit the street. Seoul's neon-soaked streets swallowed her whole. Bobia walked without direction, rage burning through her chest, replaying every moment, searching for signs she'd missed. She found herself in Itaewon, drawn by bass-heavy music she could feel in her bones. The club's entrance glowed red and gold. She walked in without thinking, ordered whiskey, expensive, neat, and let it burn. She was on her 3rd glass when she saw them. Smith and her former friend, walking in with business associates. Of course Smith would parade his victory through Seoul's trendiest club. Something inside Bob Ia snapped. Not into pieces, into something sharp. She scanned the club with a lawyer's eye for leverage. Then she saw him. Corner booth, tailored black suit, hair slicked back, a tattoo visible at his neckline. Intricate, floral, definitely not corporate. Surrounded by men who moved like security, watched the crowd like they were cataloging threats. Everyone maintained careful distance, like they knew something she didn't. He was dangerous. Obviously, viscerally dangerous. Perfect. Bobia walked directly toward him with courtroom confidence. His security tensed. The man looked up, dark eyes assessing. "I need you to kiss me," Bobia said in Korean. "Right now. Make it look real." One eyebrow raised. "And why would I do that?" Because I'm about to make a scene either way, and this way you get to be the center of it. She glanced toward Smith's group. Also because I'm a corporate lawyer who just got spectacularly betrayed, and I'm exactly angry enough to do something catastrophically stupid. For one dangerous moment, he just looked at her. Then his mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Corporate lawyer, he repeated. Interesting. He stood, taller than she'd expected, and pulled her close, one hand at her back, the other cupping her face with surprising gentleness. Try to sell it, he murmured. Then he kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was a claim, a statement, a declaration of war. Babia gripped his jacket, her mind blank except for the taste of whiskey and the feeling of being chosen, being wanted. Being something after 18 months of being nothing. The club erupted. Phones came out. Voices rose. Somewhere in the chaos. What the hell? He broke the kiss slowly, keeping her close. His eyes held hers with devastating intensity. You have no idea what you just did, he said quietly. Neither do you, Babia answered. Someone whispered, That's Park Seo-jun. Babia didn't know the name, but from the way the crowd parted, from Smith's pale face, from her ex-best friend's shock, everyone else did. Come with me, Seo-jun said, before this gets complicated. Too late, Babia replied, but let him guide her toward a private exit. Behind them, cameras flashed, videos uploaded. By the time she stepped into the black car waiting outside, her kiss with Park Seo-jun was already viral. She'd wanted to reclaim her dignity, so she'd gotten a crime lord's attention instead. Babia's eyes snapped open, heart racing. The first thing she saw was her phone lighting up, a notification chiming incessantly. She reached for it, expecting nothing more than a typical morning message, perhaps an email, maybe a text. Instead, the screen was flooded with a series of videos, each one of her lips brushing against Seo-jun's in a public display of affection. The kiss that had gone viral overnight. Her phone vibrated, and she glanced at the caller ID. Seo-jun. She nearly dropped the phone. The weight of the moment, still raw from the night before, crashed down on her. But before she could respond, a sharp bang shattered the silence of her apartment. Her ears rang as the windows erupted, glass flying in every direction. The sound of more shots followed, hitting the walls around her. Instinctively, Bob E. ducked low, crawling toward the door, but another blast punctuated the chaos outside. She froze. It didn't take long for her to put two and two together. Someone was testing her. Someone was trying to find out if she had truly made a connection with the Park family, if she was worth taking out before she could become a bigger threat. Before she could plan her next move, the door to her apartment burst open. In the doorway stood Seo-jun, his presence commanding, calm, and unnervingly in control. He didn't flinch at the chaos around him, didn't even blink at the sight of the bullet holes, the shattered windows. Without hesitation, he moved, his team behind him, quickly securing the area and taking out the remaining threats. The security footage of the gunman didn't even register for Bob Ia as Seo-jun's voice broke through the daze that had overtaken her mind. It's over. They're gone. She nodded, still shaken but strangely numb. Seo-jun's sharp eyes met hers. He was processing everything, and the wheels in his mind were already turning. I need your help, he said, his tone unwavering. I can make this go away, all of it. But first you'll need to come with me. 6 months. You'll be my public fiancé. In return, I'll destroy Smith's life piece by piece, like a carefully planned operation. I'll dismantle everything he's built, every connection he's made, and you will help me. Your legal expertise can make my business operations legitimate. We'll outmaneuver every rival he has. Her heart pounded in her chest. The weight of his words hung in the air. thick and suffocating. She glanced around at the ruined apartment, the broken glass and the bullet-ridden walls. It was surreal, but this was her reality now. She had no choice. Babia looked up at Seojun, her mind racing, heart still pounding, but deep inside, she knew what she had to do. There was no turning back. "I'll do it," she said, her voice steady, despite the fear swirling within her. "I'll help you, but you better keep your word." Seojun's lips curved into a cold, calculating smile, and for the first time, she truly saw the power he wielded. "I always do." Seojun led Babia through the imposing gates of the Park family compound, the air heavy with the weight of tradition and expectation. The compound loomed like a fortress, its sleek modern design a stark contrast to the ancient customs it guarded within. The marble floors, the sprawling garden, the lavish rooms, all felt cold, as though the wealth surrounding them was meant to preserve more than just luxury. It was meant to preserve power. But for Babia, it felt more like a cage. As she stepped over the threshold, she could feel the eyes of the family watching her, sharp, calculating, and filled with skepticism. The inner circle, Seojun's trusted advisors and relatives, stood nearby, their gaze never leaving her. The whispers, though silent, were deafening. She had only just entered their world, yet they already saw her as an outsider, someone who didn't belong. They had every reason to feel that way. After all, she was a stranger in a world built on loyalty, trust, and bloodlines. And Bob E. was none of these things. His mother, the matriarch of the Park family, moved toward them with an air of authority that chilled the room. She was every bit the commanding figure Seojun had warned her about, a woman whose presence alone could bend the most formidable of wills. Her gaze was icy, appraising Babia like a subject she might discard without a second thought. She wasted no time. "Who are you, really?" His mother's voice cut through the silence, a question laced with suspicion. "What makes you think you can be a part of this family?" Babia stood her ground, her posture straight, her expression calm. She knew exactly what this was about. This wasn't just an introduction. It was a test, and she had no intention of failing. "I'm a woman who understands exactly what loyalty means," she said firmly, her voice steady. "And I'm here because Seojun trusts me." Her answer hung in the air. But his mother didn't seem satisfied. The interrogation continued, each question probing deeper into her background, her knowledge, her motives. They were looking for cracks, for weaknesses. Babia felt the weight of their scrutiny, but she didn't flinch. She answered each question with precision, her legal mind working to frame every response in a way that demonstrated her understanding of the stakes. She wasn't just playing a role here. She was fully aware of what loyalty meant in this world. She understood that loyalty wasn't just a matter of words. It was about sacrifice, about making choices that could cost you everything. She knew the power of bloodlines, of heritage, of family ties that went beyond the superficial. She had studied them all. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, his mother's gaze softened, just a fraction. It wasn't much, but it was enough for Bobby to know she had passed the test, at least for now. As Seojun watched the exchange from the sidelines, he saw something shift. His family's cold reception had begun to thaw, albeit slowly. They had seen that Babia wasn't afraid to face them. She wasn't someone who could be easily intimidated or dismissed. She understood this world, understood the price of loyalty, and she was willing to pay it. And maybe, just maybe, that was the beginning of her place within the Park family. Babia's world tilted as Seojun laid out the full scale of Smith's betrayal. At first, it had seemed like a personal rejection, an ugly breakup after months of what she thought was trust. But now she understood. Smith's actions weren't about her at all. They were part of something much darker, far more dangerous than she had imagined. The proposal he had made to her, one she'd turned down with her usual commitment to ethics, was merely the surface of a web that had been carefully spun for months, even years. Seo-jun's voice was steady, but Bob Ia could hear the tension in his words, the weight of the secrets he was revealing. Smith's consulting firm, which Bob Ia had once admired for its sleek operations and the promise of success, wasn't just an ordinary business. It was a front. Beneath its polished exterior, Smith's firm was involved in far more sinister dealings: money laundering, corporate espionage, and complex networks of rival criminal enterprises. Smith wasn't just working for himself, Seo-jun said, leaning forward as if the very act of speaking about it made the reality more palpable. He was a pawn in a much larger game. The company's legitimate dealings were nothing but a cover. Their real money came from illegal transactions, routes for shipping, banks, off-the-books investments. Everything you thought was corporate strategy, Bobby, was a smokescreen. As the pieces began to fall into place, Bobbia's mind raced, her breath catching as the truth hit her in waves. It wasn't just her. It was everyone around her, everyone who had been close to Smith and had trusted him. But there was more. Seo-jun wasn't done. Bobbia's former best friend's family, the ones she had grown up with, had their fingers deep in these operations. Their control over the shipping routes that ran between countries, their influence over key industries, everything Bob E. had once believed was above board was now tainted. "Your old friend's family," Seo-jun continued, his eyes meeting hers with unflinching honesty. "They're the ones who control the shipping routes, the ones that facilitate most of these transactions. They've been using Smith's firm as a way to funnel illegal goods, weapons, and even people. Your loyalty to the law, it was a threat to them. You were always going to be in their way." Bob Ia's stomach churned, the betrayal cutting deeper than anything she had experienced. It wasn't just that Smith had left her. He had discarded her, removed her from the equation before she could uncover the truth. Her integrity, her commitment to doing things by the book, had been her undoing. To them, she was a liability. They had known her moral code would be a problem long before she had even begun to piece it all together. The realization settled over her like a cold fog. She hadn't been dumped by Smith in the usual way of lovers falling apart. No, she had been deliberately pushed out, used as a pawn in a game of corporate power and criminal deceit. Bobby wasn't just a casualty of a broken heart. She was a casualty of a larger, far more terrifying conspiracy. And now, her life was tangled in the mess of it all, forced to reckon with the damage done and the choices that lay ahead. The air at Seoul's most prestigious charity gala was thick with expectation, a shimmer of wealth and power pulsating through the grand ballroom. Guests draped in designer gowns and tailored suits glided between polished pillars and crystal chandeliers, their laughter echoing with the type of hollow joy reserved for the elite. Yet, it was Bobbia's entrance that caused a collective pause, a ripple through the crowd as she stepped into the room. Gone was the hesitant woman, unsure of her place, the one who had once cowered in the shadows of power. Tonight, Bob E. was a woman transformed, her confidence a cloak, her every step measured and calculated. Her eyes, sharp and calculating, scanned the room, and it wasn't long before Seo-jun joined her, his quiet presence like a silent storm, ready to unfold. Across the room, Smith and his new fiancée, a picture of elegance, stood before a sea of congratulatory gestures. Their smiles were bright, their poses flawless, so meticulously crafted, one could almost feel the weight of their manufactured happiness. They were the epitome of success in the eyes of Seoul's socialites, a power couple that seemed untouchable. But Bob Ia and Seo-jun saw them for what they were, hollow, vulnerable, built on lies. As the evening progressed, the two women moved through the crowd, speaking in hushed tones with the most influential figures present. They had done their homework, gathered the details, and now it was time to strike. Bob Ia's gaze landed on Smith as he conversed with a group of high-powered individuals. She approached, her heels clicking on the marble floor like the ticking of a clock winding down. The room, sensing her presence, fell into a quieter hum as she smoothly inserted herself into the conversation, her voice a cool, calculated whisper. The crowd listened, rapt, intrigued, their eyes flickering between Bob E and the vulnerable couple. "Isn't it interesting?" Bob Ia said, her words a casual dart. "How someone with so many failed ventures still manages to maintain such a pristine reputation?" Her gaze flicked briefly to Smith, and then, like a snake striking, she added, "I suppose the wedding was meant to solidify that. Did you know the entire board was questioning the integrity of his latest acquisition just last month?" A shocked silence spread through the crowd. Smith's face twitched, his carefully constructed persona beginning to fray at the edges. He forced a smile, but the tension in his shoulders betrayed him. Bob Ia wasn't finished. She turned to the fiancé, her tone turning colder. "And what of the rumors surrounding the merger? Funny how that never came up in the press release, isn't it? Strange, don't you think?" Seojun stood nearby, his calm demeanor the perfect contrast to Bob Ia's unrelenting force. He, too, unleashed calculated blows, his words carefully chosen to dismantle Smith's carefully curated reputation. The couple was under siege, their vulnerabilities exposed like a carefully painted facade cracking under pressure. The night wore on, and with each whispered conversation, each revelation, the cracks in Smith's perfect image deepened. The gala, once a celebration of his triumphs, had become the stage for his unraveling. By the time the evening drew to a close, Smith's world had shifted. What had been untouchable only hours ago was now marred by doubt and suspicion, the stability of his alliance hanging by a thread. Bob E, standing tall and unflinching, had made her mark. She wasn't just a player anymore, she was a force. And for the first time, the elite of Seoul realized that they had underestimated her. Bob Ia stood before the mirror, the sharp lines of her reflection staring back at her, reminding her of the battle she had fought and the wounds that still lingered. She had already suffered so much in silence, her past a collection of fragile moments that she had guarded fiercely. But Smith, in his relentless pursuit of control, had struck at the very core of her vulnerability. He threatened to unearth the darkest chapters of her life, details about her medical history, her adoption records, fragments of her identity that she had carefully buried. His plan was simple: expose her as a woman broken by her past, unfit for the leadership she had fought so hard to claim. The thought of those secrets being laid bare made her stomach twist. Yet there was something deeper than fear that churned within her. It was anger. A fire she had been hiding for too long, and now it was beginning to smolder. She couldn't let Smith succeed. Not this time. Not when she had come so far. The truth of her past, though painful, was hers to tell, not his to exploit. But fate, it seemed, had a different plan. Just as Smith thought he had the upper hand, Seojun's network, with its far-reaching influence and quiet precision, unraveled the threads of Smith's own dirty little secrets. The exposé was swift, a devastating blow that sent shockwaves through every corner of the city. Smith, who had so confidently wielded his power over Bob Ia, now found himself exposed, his sins laid bare for all to see. The embezzlement, the fraud, the whispered connections to the rival syndicate's assassination attempt on Seojun's predecessor, it all came to light with chilling clarity. The walls that Smith had so carefully built around himself began to crumble. Bob Ia watched from the shadows as the world around Smith began to disintegrate. For the first time in weeks, a strange sense of clarity washed over her. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about something far larger, far more dangerous. The system that had allowed men like Smith to rise, the same system that had betrayed her, needed to be destroyed. Revenge was small in comparison to the dismantling of a machine built on lies and corruption. She had never been naive enough to believe that power would come without a price. She had paid that price more times than she cared to count. But now, with Smith's fall, something inside her had shifted. She realized that she couldn't stop at personal satisfaction. The system, the very structure that had allowed men like him to control lives, needed to burn. Babia knew what she had to do. It was no longer enough to expose the darkness of those who wronged her. She would tear it all down, piece by piece, until the foundation of this corrupt empire crumbled into dust. And when it did, the world would finally see the true face of the woman who had once been silenced, but was now ready to rise from the ashes of a broken past. Babia had always prided herself on her legal expertise. Her corporate training had been strict, methodical, and impersonal, focused more on profit margins than ethical considerations. But now, standing at the crossroads of a moral battlefield, her training was being redefined. This wasn't about protecting assets or structuring contracts. This was warfare, legal warfare. Her mind worked in overdrive as she pieced together the complex puzzle of Smith's criminal activities. At first, it seemed like a distant, intangible challenge, the kind of thing she would have ignored in her old life. But now, every trace of illegal action, every illicit transaction, became a thread she had to pull, a layer she had to peel back. She combed through financial records, tracking money as it slipped through shell corporations, each layer of deception more elaborate than the last. The deeper she went, the clearer it became. Smith wasn't just a businessman with shady dealings. He was a criminal, a mastermind with blood on his hands. And Bobby was on the verge of unraveling it all. In those long hours spent digging through documents, there was one thing Babia never expected: her relationship with Seo Jun. At first, he had been nothing more than a tool, a piece in her strategy to take down Smith. His ruthless exterior was as cold as the walls around him. But something shifted. As the stakes got higher, as the lines between right and wrong blurred even further, Babia saw another side of him. Beneath the calculated decisions and the sharp edge of his demeanor was a strategic mind, a mind that respected her intellect and, for the first time, saw her as more than just an ally. He saw her as an equal. Seo Jun, in turn, began to recognize the strength in Babia that he had initially underestimated. His world had been one of ruthless ambition, where power was the ultimate currency. But Babia wasn't like the others. She had a different kind of power, the kind that wasn't born of intimidation or fear. Her strength lay in her adaptability, her ability to shift strategies in an instant, to see patterns where others saw chaos. As they worked together side by side, he saw a complexity in her that made her more than just a tool. She was a partner, in every sense of the word. Their relationship wasn't just about shared goals anymore. It was about understanding, about respect forged in the fire of a common enemy. It wasn't smooth. It wasn't easy. There were moments when their differences were sharp enough to cut through the tension, when they clashed over methods or ideologies. But through it all, there was an undeniable bond growing between them. What started as a performance had become something far deeper, something neither of them had anticipated. As Bobby traced the final steps of Smith's money trail, piecing together the evidence that would ultimately bring him to justice, she realized that this battle wasn't just about legal victory. It was about survival. Survival for her, for Seo Jun, and for the future they were now building, together, with no turning back. Smith had always been one to appreciate the finer things in life: extravagance, power, and the ability to shape the world around him with just a flick of his wrist. His wedding was no exception. Set in a sprawling estate, The guests, all carefully selected, mingled beneath crystal chandeliers that glittered like stars, their laughter and clinking glasses a perfect symphony for the grand spectacle. The vows were set to seal not just a marriage, but an empire. A marriage that promised a partnership as solid as gold, with profits in the millions and a future only Smith and his allies could dictate. But Bob Ia and Seo-jun were about to rewrite the script in a way no one could have foreseen. As the bride made her way down the aisle, the doors suddenly burst open. The murmurs of surprise quickly turned to gasps as federal prosecutors, flanked by a team of agents, entered the room, dragging with them stacks of evidence. The air thickened with tension, every eye darting between the couple and the unexpected interruption. Bob Ia, her face a mask of cold determination, stepped forward, clutching the pile of documents that would soon crumble Smith's empire. She hadn't come here for revenge. This was a necessity. The evidence she held wasn't just a list of crimes. It was the blueprint of everything Smith had done to build his power. Embezzlement, conspiracy, money laundering, and the carefully concealed ties to organized crime all spilled out like a dam breaking, flooding the space. The silence that followed was deafening. Smith's smile faltered, his facade cracking for the first time in what seemed like forever. His guests, the ones who had once stood by him, now shifted uncomfortably, some with fear in their eyes, others with guilt. As the truth unfolded, arrests were made swiftly, each one a devastating blow to Smith's carefully curated world. Guests were handcuffed, their faces pale with disbelief, some muttering in shock, others too stunned to speak. The room that had been filled with laughter just moments ago now echoed with the sound of chains and murmurs of betrayal. It wasn't just Smith's downfall. It was the fall of an entire network of corruption, a web so intricate and tangled that even the brightest minds had failed to untangle it. As the wedding crumbled, so too did the power dynamics that had held it together. The alliance that Smith had worked tirelessly to cement, the one that would have shaped the future for years to come, disintegrated in an instant. And amid the chaos, Bob Ia's former best friend, the one who had once shared secrets and dreams with her, now stood in the wreckage, facing the brutal truth. She had been just as much a pawn as Bob Ia had been. The realization hit her like a freight train, and for the first time, she saw her role in this entire twisted game. It was never about her. It was always about control, about using people like chess pieces. Bob Ia stood tall, watching as everything Smith had built crumbled beneath him. It was the end of a chapter she had never wanted to be part of, but in the end, it was necessary. The truth had come to light, and there was no going back. The end of the 6-month agreement was more of a turning point than either of them had anticipated. For months, Bob Ia had worn the role of the fake fiancé, playing her part with dedication and care, yet always aware of the distance between the life she thought she wanted and the one she was leading. The Seoul she had arrived in was a city where she had hoped to find herself, or at the very least, someone else's dream to follow. But somewhere between the meetings, the public appearances, and the growing connection with Seo-jun, she began to realize something more profound. She wasn't meant to be an accessory to someone else's story. She was meant to write her own. Seo-jun had always been a man of strength, confidence, and control, qualities that made him a force to be reckoned with in his business. But it wasn't until the final days of their agreement that he fully understood the transformation that had taken place in Bob Ia. She had evolved, silently but fiercely, into someone who no longer depended on anyone to define her. The woman who had once stood beside him as a partner in pretense was no longer the same. She was different now, sharper, stronger, and unmistakably her own. When Seo-jun finally asked her what came next, the words hanging in the air between them like an unspoken question, it wasn't just about the contract. It wasn't about the falsity of the engagement that had kept them bound for half a year. He wanted to know if she could stay, not as his fake fiancée, but as his genuine partner, someone who stood beside him not out of obligation but out of choice. The question was simple, yet in it lay a world of meaning. For Bobia, the answer wasn't easy. There was no script to follow, no precedent to guide her. But she knew in that moment that the choice wasn't just about Seojun. It was about her. It was about how far she'd come and where she wanted to go. For the first time, she realized she was no longer trying to fit into a life that wasn't her own. She had carved out a space for herself, a place that was hers, built not by following a path but by choosing to create one. 1 year later, when they married for real, it was more than just a union of two people. It was the culmination of a journey that neither of them had fully anticipated. The ceremony was private, intimate, honoring the blending of two heritages, two lives that had come together in unexpected harmony. There was no grand spectacle, no public display for the world to witness. It was a quiet promise made between two people who had found their way not through conventional means, but through growth, transformation, and understanding. Bobia's place was no longer something she was trying to find. She had built it, piece by piece, from the ground up. It wasn't about fitting into existing structures or conforming to anyone's expectations. She had learned how to help build something entirely new, something that was uniquely hers. And in doing so, she had found herself not just as Seojun's partner, but as her own. And just like that, Bobia found her true place, not defined by anyone else's dreams, but by her own vision of what life could be. It's a reminder that we all have the power to redefine ourselves, to step away from what's expected and create something entirely new. If Bobia's journey has inspired you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more stories like this one. I'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below and share your thoughts. See you in the next one.